So without further delay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Monroe County Plan Commission to order. It's September 19th, 2023. And Ms. Nestor Jelen, if you would kindly call the roll.
Sure. John Enright Randolph.
Here.
Bernie Giritas.
Here.
Jeffrey Morris.
Here.
Cheryl Munson.
Here.
Oh, here. Great. Edward Ullman.
Here.
Dee Owens.
I don't think she'll be here tonight.
All right. Jerry Pittsford.
Here.
Julie Thomas noted she'll be late. And then Margaret Clemens.
Here?
And then Chris Cockrum.
Here.
Okay, so we have 7 members in attendance in an in-person quorum and 1 city representative.
Okay, is there a motion to introduce the evidence?
So moved.
I'd like to introduce the following items into the evidence. The Monroe County zoning ordinance is adopted and amended. The Monroe County comprehensive plan is adopted and amended. The Monroe County subdivision control ordinance as adopted and amended. The Monroe County Plan Commission rules of procedure is adopted and amended, and the cases that were legally advertised and scheduled for a hearing on tonight's agenda.
I move acceptance of the evidence.
Second.
Okay. I'll call the roll. Bernie Giritas.
Yes.
Jeff Morris.
Yes.
Cheryl Munson. I'll come back. Edward Ullman.
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes?
Tron Enright Randolph.
Yes.
Cheryl Munson.
Yes. Hold
Okay.
on, I'll get my,
No worries. Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda as advertised and listed on today's docket?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. Jeff Morris.
yes.
Cheryl Munson.
Yes.
Edward Ullman. Jerry Pittsford.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes?
Tron Enright Randolph.
Yes.
Bernie Giritas.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, there are no minutes, and there's no administrative business, there's no unfinished business, so we move right on to new business, and that's case number 1, which is SSS-23-3, the Mercury Sliding Scale Subdivision Preliminary Plat with a road width waiver requested, as well as the waiver of the final hearing. So I believe Mr. Smith will be reviewing that with us. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, so for members of the Plan Commission and members of the public, this specific request is a preliminary plat to subdivide 34.26 plus or minus acres at 9695 North Bowman Road into 4 lots. This request includes a road width waiver, and this is the reason for bringing it to the Plan Commission, and then also a waiver of the final hearing. Just quick summary, the road width here is approximately 15 feet. 18 feet is required for the subdivision. Some details for each of the lots. Lot 1 will be 18.9 acres with 12.9 acres buildable. Lot 2 will be 3.7 acres with 2.79 acres buildable. Lot 3, 5.21 acres with 3.74 acres buildable. And then Lot 4 being 6.45 acres with 2.42 acres buildable. Kind of background discussion for this subdivision. So the road width waiver, the petitioner has requested a waiver from the improvement, reservation, and design standards outlined in Chapter 862-4A, which is the general design considerations for a sliding scale option. And this reads, number 5, subdivisions on roads less than 18 feet in width shall be prohibited unless otherwise waived pursuant to Chapter 850-12. Regarding the comprehensive plans designation for this area, it is designated as farm and forest, and this is categorized as low residential density is necessary in order to protect associated and adjoining vulnerable lands and to sustain particular quality of life and lifestyle opportunities for the long term in a sparsely populated scenic setting. This site gains access from North Bowman Road, a designated local road measured by the surveyor as approximately 15 feet wide, The existing driveway entrance on the northeast side of the petition site is required to be removed per the highway department to meet safety standards. And then I did include some slides after this talking about that. So staff believes that widening the road requires significant land disturbance and possible removal of trees that currently add character to the area. And as such, staff believes that practical difficulties have been demonstrated. So the image that you see here on the screen, this is an easement that travels through 9700 North Bowman Road that's outlined here in the orange color. This is not part of the subdivision, but an easement does run through it. So we did want to point out that the petitioner applied for a right-of-way activity permit RW-23-246, and this ensures access to the property. This permit was also issued on September 8th, 2023. This is because the deed does not grant rights to this property to use the existing easement, so staff wanted to be sure that this property had its own means of access and was not going to be utilizing the existing easement, which would otherwise trigger road improvement standards. This is just the location and zoning maps. As you can see on the right, the entire area is zoned agricultural reserve. This is the site conditions map. Quite a significant amount of buildable area to be utilized. So on the left side of the screen, you'll notice a location of the existing driveway that is to be removed. And then on the right-hand side, this is the point of access for the proposed subdivision. These are just some site photos and some aerial photos of the surrounding environment. You'll note that it is a pretty densely vegetative area. Staff did feel it was necessary to include a discussion about sinkhole conservancy areas for this site. So sinkholes are present on this site and as such are designated as sinkhole conservancy areas, which are included on the plat. The existing easement does not encroach into the sinkhole conservancy area. The total buildable area factors in the sinkhole conservancy areas, and each lot exceeds the minimum 1 acre buildable area requirement. And just as a note, the southern sinkhole is approximately 27 feet from the last closed contour to the easement, and the northern sinkhole is approximately 35 feet from the last contour. So this illustrates that while there is a sinkhole conservancy area on the lot, both of which exceed the required 25 feet per Chapter 829. On August 17th, 2023, the Plat Committee did vote to send a positive recommendation of the preliminary plat and road width waiver to the Plan Commission by a vote of 3-0. On the right-hand side is just a snippet of the proposed subdivision. So staff does recommend approval of the sliding scale subdivision preliminary plat as well as the road width waiver based on the findings of fact, as well as subject to the Monroe County Highway Department reports.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there questions of staff from members of the Plan Commission? Does anyone have any? Okay, then we'll turn it over to the petitioner or the petitioner's representative. If you would kindly come to the podium and sign in, and you'll have 15 minutes to discuss it with us, Mr. Deckard.
I don't think we're going to need 15 minutes tonight, but thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Eric Deckard with Deckard Land Surveying. I'm here to represent the petitioner. I'd like to thank the planning department over there for a nicely composed report. I don't have any further comments to add to this. It is kind of really what it is where we have the 30-foot easement, you know, navigating in between the two sinkholes. We tried to play as conservative as we possibly could. When we created the sinkhole conservancy areas around the sinkholes, meaning that we gave them a little bit more than what was necessary. But if Plan Commission has any questions, be glad to answer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Deckard. Do members of the Plan Commission have questions for Mr. Deckard? I don't see any.
I
Oh,
do.
yes, Mr. Pittsford.
Did you look at the sinkholes and make any kind of assessment of the condition there? And are they pretty heavily vegetated? Are they open and things still giving way in there, as you can see?
You know, Jerry,
Oh, I gotta
I
turn
did
that
not
off.
get in and really do any analysis on the sinkholes. Really what we did was we brought in a LiDAR contouring over top of our boundary survey, and we was able to determine where the last closed contour was. The easement itself was a previously recorded easement. We had modified that easement by extending it beyond the property that had already navigated through and also meandered between the two sinkholes. But I did not pay attention whether these were open sinkholes or closed sinkholes.
Thank you, Mr. Deckard. Mr. Enright Randolph?
I think this would be a perfect time to have planning expand on kind of how these conservancy areas are identified and what kind of tasks that the professional surveyor is charged with delineating them on the survey, but not going out there and, you know, ground truthing those, because that's not their part of their profession. And would you like to expand on that?
Sure. The definition of the sinkhole rim in chapter 829, it references the last closed contour. So as Mr. Deckard referenced, he went ahead and went out 25 feet from that last closed contour. And in speaking with Mr. Deckard, I think that he wanted to just have it as a concentric circle, although most sinkholes are not perfectly round. So that's why there's a little bit of difference between the 25 feet versus what's being shown, which is a little bit larger than that.
And if I might clarify, I was just asking anecdotally if you noticed if they were long existing or if they were still in the process of giving in.
Okay, I don't believe there are any further questions from us, but we will hear from the public, and if need be, you might have an opportunity to come back,
All
okay?
right, thank you.
Thank you. If there are members of the public who are in this room or online or on the telephone, please either come to the telephone, raise your virtual hand on Zoom, or press *9 on the telephone to be recognized. We don't see anyone. So if there are members of the public who are opposed to this petition, please either come to the podium, raise your virtual hand on Zoom, or press *9 on the telephone in order to be recognized. And staff, I can't see the attendees on the, I don't know if anyone is trying to be recognized.
I don't see anyone with their
Okay.
hand raised.
Okay, there's no need for a rebuttal because there was no public participation, so we move back to us. And if there is a member of the board who would like to make a motion to approve this proposal, we can. Thank you.
Matter of case number SSS-23-3. This is the McCurry Sliding Scale Subdivision Preliminary Plat. I move that we approve the preliminary plat, including the road width waiver and the waiver request for final hearing, subject to the staff report, findings of fact, and conditions set upon it by the Monroe County Highway Department.
Second.
And I think I did see Cheryl Munson's hand briefly raised. I don't know if you could check that out.
Yes.
Yes, is your
Hi
hand
there.
raised?
My hand is raised, please.
Yes. Yes,
And
Counselor.
I want to advise that the motion was completely inaudible to anybody on Zoom. I think the microphone may not be working for Mr. Garitas or is not positioned well.
Oh, thank you, Ms.
We
Munson.
have a lot of difficulty. We have a lot of difficulty with microphones.
Thanks, Cheryl. Is this
Completely.
better?
Much better. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Do you want to repeat your motion?
I can. Matter of case number SSS-23-3. This is the McCurry Sliding Scale Subdivision Preliminary Plat. I move that we approve the preliminary plat, including the waiver of final hearing. The road width waiver is requested, subject to the findings of fact and subject to the Monroe County Highway Department.
And
Second.
also the waiver of final hearing, did you say that?
I did, but
Okay,
I'll say it
thank you.
again if I need to.
Thank you.
And my second still stands.
Okay. So if you would kindly call the roll?
It's been moved and seconded to approve SSS-23-3, the Mercury Sliding Scale Subdivision Preliminary Plat with a road width waiver and a waiver of the final hearing. A vote in favor is a vote to approve the subdivision and the waiver of final hearing with the road width waiver. Jeff Morris,
Yes.
Cheryl Munson,
Yes.
Edward Ullman, Jerry Pittsford,
Yes.
Margaret Clemens,
Yes.
Tron Enright Randolph,
Yes.
Bernie Garitas. Okay, motion carries 7-0.
Okay, great. We're moving on to the second item, which is PUO-23-4, Worms Way PUD Outline Plan. This is the preliminary hearing, and there has been a request for a waiver of the final hearing concerning two parcels totaling 12.86 acres in Washington Township, Section 28 at 7850 North Wayport Road. Mr. Myers?
Thank you. Okay, this is PUO-23-4. It's the planned unit outline plan petition for the former Worms Way property at 7850 North Wayport Road. The petitioner is seeking to establish a planned unit development, or PUD, at this address for both the 6.65 acre lot and the 6.21 acre lot, both A and B respectively, of the Worms Way Type A plat. The subject property is currently zoned Agricultural Rural Reserve and was originally developed pursuant to a 1995 special exception for agribusiness to allow for the establishment of Worms Way. At the date of this packet's publication and today, the petitioner is proposing the following permitted uses to be included within this proposed PUD. It's religious facilities, pet services, furniture sales, transfer or storage terminal, general contractor, metal fabrication, warehousing and distribution. If approved by the county commissioners, the petitioner will be directed to submit a planned unit development plan. The petitioner has said that there are no plans to expand the building footprint or parking lots or driveways at this time. And that all of that information would be included in the outline plan that governs those permitted uses and the use of the site. The next couple slides, I have use definitions from Chapter 802 of the current zoning ordinance. So each of these definitions would apply based on the petitioner's identification of the uses that they want on the site. That is religious facilities, pet services, furniture sales, transfer or storage terminal on this page. I also included the intensity of each of those uses and where they might be permitted in other districts in the county. So for religious facilities, it is a high intensity use, and it's currently permitted in all residential zones, the limited business zone, and the general business zone. Pet services is a low intensity use. It's permitted in the general business zone. Furniture sales is a low intensity use as well, permitted in the general business zone. And transfer or storage terminal is a high intensity use, permitted in the light industrial and the heavy industrial zoning districts. The remaining uses here are general contractor, a medium intensity use, permitted in general business, light industrial, and heavy industrial. Metal fabrication, which is also a high intensity use, permitted in the light industrial and heavy industrial districts. I added a special note with this one. This use technically is permitted on the site per the 1905-VAR-28 use variance request that was approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that use is technically available today on that site. Warehousing and distribution activities is a high intensity use and is permitted in the light industrial and heavy industrial zoning districts. A bit more background on this petition. In 1995, the special exception request was made by Worms Way to both the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Plan Commission for the use of agribusiness and greenhouse. It was approved and met the permit requirements to allow for the business. According to the property report card, the building on Lot A was erected in 1995, and the site plan was amended in 2001 to develop the northern parcel to accommodate the expanding business. Some recent cases here are on the screen. 1905-VAR-28, that was that use variance to add metal fabrication to the property that I mentioned previously. Again, that was approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals in 2019. REZ-21-3 was a rezone request from agricultural rural reserve to light industrial. That petition received a positive recommendation by the Plan Commission in October of 2021. However, it was ultimately denied by the County Commissioners on October 27th, 2021. Next, VAR-22-34 and VAR-22-36 were both use variances to add general contractor to the site. Both of those were ultimately denied by the Board of Zoning Appeals in August of 2022 and March of 2023. On this slide, I've included a letter from the Monroe County Assessor. After these failed attempts of a rezone and additional use variances, the petitioner or property owner wrote to or called to the county assessor talking about how they were not able to sell the property, and they have made efforts into changing its zoning or allowing different uses and can't get anyone to purchase the site. The Monroe County Assessor performed a review of the site and of the materials and the evidence that the property owner provide, as well as a conversation with planning staff, and ultimately produced this letter that talks about reducing the assessment of the property. Her assessment includes, let's see, these changes are for the tax year 2023, pay 2024. This is also included in the packet. Okay, so here I've got just a quick slide about planned unit developments, if anyone is curious about what they are. Planned unit developments, or PUDs, are a customized zoning that allows for a combination or unique set of uses, not typically possible under current zoning designations. Applicants create a PUD outline plan that will dictate what uses or mix of uses will be permitted on the property, as well as what design standards those uses will adhere to. The outline plan is typically crafted in a way that wherever it falls silent, the rules of the underlying zoning district will apply. And then I have the definition as well as for a planned unit development that's found in Chapter 801 here at the bottom of the screen. Okay, here's the current zoning map. We see it's agricultural rural reserve with estate residential to the north and the east. Agricultural rural reserve continues to the south and to the west for a short distance. Here we have the comprehensive plan. It designates this area as rural residential. And here we have an aerial screenshot of the subject property, as well as a few neighboring properties that are of commercial nature. To the south, not adjacent, but to the south is Bloomington Auto Parts. To the north, again, not adjacent, but still within a reasonable distance, is Cook Regenitech and Oliver Winery. The next few slides are a collection of site photos that were taken by staff. So this is just to get you familiar with the site if you've not driven out to the property to look at it. I'm just going to scroll through all of these, and we can come back to any if we feel necessary. This slide here shows distance to nearby residential structures. The colored flags are locations where pictures were taken. Those pictures will be in the following slides. They also have the flags colored where that picture was taken. So this was taken during a time of year that the foliage is low, so it's a little bit easier to see how wooded it is and how much of the neighboring properties that you can view. And all of these are included in the packet as well. Okay, this slide here is the Monroe County State Road 37 corridor plan. This was produced in February of 2010. Staff felt it important to include this in the packet and this presentation because it does talk about the corridor plan for when I-69 was coming through. And there was some information in here that specifically calls out to or makes reference to the Worms Way property and other commercial activity in the area. In the staff packet, as well as on the screen, you'll see this yellow boxes that are around sections of that report that specifically call to or reference commercial activity in the area, as well as Worms Way property specifically. It makes mention of, this plan makes mention of allowing existing commercial uses to expand within their own property. However, it recommends not allowing them to expand into new properties or adjacent properties in the area. Okay, this slide and the next couple slides are the petitioner's statement to the Plan Commission that talks about their request in general, talks about Worms Way's property history, zoning uses, as well as their rationale to request the planned unit development. So I will just click through these. We can come back to them if needed. I'm sure the petitioner or the petitioner's representative will have more to speak on this item. Here we also have the amended PUD statement and outline plan. So this is the document that would govern the planned unit development on this site. It includes outline plan details such as the uses permitted, setbacks, let's see, parking standards, paving standards, as well as standards including open space requirements, green space, etc. Overall, the petitioner is basically saying that there will be no expansion of the existing buildings and there'll be no change to the parking. Yes, let's see here. Here we have the original Worms Way Type A administrative subdivision that I referenced at the beginning. We did receive one letter of support. This is from Peterson Realty, Mr. Andy Peterson. This was included in the packet. In the next few slides, I have a few letters of opposition. I will note that these were not included in the original staff packet that was published last week. However, I did make amendments to the packet, so if you opened it today, you would see these. But I also have hard copies here if any Plan Commission members would like to see them. If you have not read through them, I can hand them out. But I'm going to click through these as well. Jackie's going to hand those out to you all right now.
Thanks so much, Jackie.
Okay, that brings me to staff's recommendation. Staff recommends forwarding this petition with a negative recommendation to the Board of Commissioners based on the findings of fact, specifically due to its incompatibility with the Monroe County Comprehensive Plan. Staff also makes note that consideration of this petition site under the CDO draft zoning should be considered by the Planning Commission to identify a suitable zoning district and whether an amendment to the comprehensive plan is warranted. I will now take any questions.
Okay, do members of the Plan Commission have questions for staff? Mr. Enright Randolph?
I guess mine goes back to the comprehensive plan and staff using that as a matrix to really determine a recommendation. And I just wanted to ask a couple questions. That comprehensive plan was passed when? 1997?
The comprehensive plan.
Oh, sorry, I was thinking of the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, the zoning ordinance was 1997. The comprehensive plan has had multiple iterations, one in 2012, and then the urbanizing area plan was 2015.
Okay. 2015, 2012. Okay, great. And by de facto, I guess, planning came with the recommendation as a negative recommendation due to the comprehensive plan, and our role and charge as Plan Commission members is to reconcile what the petitioner is requesting, what the best use of that land is, and how that coincides with the comprehensive plan. So, in sense, we're charged with looking at things outside the context of the comprehensive plan, correct?
I think that can be a fair assessment.
Are you talking about in the recommendation right now for the rezone or for the county development ordinance?
I'm talking about kind of our charge as Plan Commission members, that if we see things that skew or let's say are maybe the best use of that land that are outside of the comprehensive plan, we're supposed to be evaluating those, correct?
Yes, yes.
Right. So we're not a BZA body, but we are supposed to look at things that don't fit with the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan, it sounds like it's almost 10 years out from that. And I think the fact that we have an interstate now in the county and also other factors, but I guess that's more of a comment. I won't get into comment. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have anything that you would like to add to your response to Mr. Enright Randolph? No? Okay. Other questions from members? Yes, Mr. Pittsford.
Yeah, the referenced State Road 37 corridor plan dated February 2010. Who published that? I was on Plan Commission and I should know that, but I don't recall that being published by the Plan Commission.
It was published by the Economic Growth Team. If you look down at the bottom right-hand corner, so,
Well, then who's economic growth?
well, I'm Monroe County Courthouse Centennial. It's unclear, isn't it, Mr.
Yeah,
Myers?
It does say under the plan, it says that it was Strategic Development Group was the name of the group. Scott Burgeons was Senior Project Manager.
And that was commissioned by,
I believe
is
this
it the
was
county
a,
commissioners or the Plan Commission?
I believe this was a county commissioner's plan that they had allocated funds for this study.
Okay, because, you know, a 13-year-old study, and it was written before 69 and the surrounding areas were developed, the arterial roads and stuff. So I just wanted to have a little context and reference to that. Thank you.
Okay, are there other questions for staff from members of the commission? Okay, Mr. Carmen, I would assume.
I do have another
Oh,
question.
yes, Mr. Enright Randolph.
I guess, outside of the factors of the comprehensive plan, was there any other reason to recommend a negative recommendation as far as like constraints on the site? I know it's a commercial septic. Were any of these other factors a driver for the recommendation that staff has put forth?
There are some items in the findings that didn't quite meet the requirements. Let me see if I can find those.
And while you're doing that, I just want to commend you on that background report. I thought that was tremendous, and I really thank you for your effort and time on that.
One of the things that we did discuss in a staff meeting was just that this is a request for a plan unit development. And so when you're requesting a plan unit development, it's a mix of commercial that can include business uses, industrial uses, residential uses. This tends to have a mix of business and industrial uses. There could be maybe a coordination with the petitioner regarding a zoning district that already exists in the county that might be fitting. I understand that this is a request that's coming after several denials of other requests, and so I think we're still looking at this from a perspective of a brand new plan unit development. Does it meet the criteria? And so it's providing a mix of business and industrial uses, not really in a coordinated effort. It's just sort of specific uses that might work at the site.
Thank you. That carries a lot of weight for my decision making versus it just doesn't comply with the comprehensive plan. I really thank you for addressing that. And if there's anything else you'd like to add, I'm really trying to hear that from planning's perspective.
And I will note on the findings page, findings 1, the extent to which the plan unit development meets the purposes of the zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan, and any other adopted planning objectives of the county. And then number 6, the relationship and compatibility of the proposal to the adjacent properties and neighborhoods, and whether the proposal would substantially interfere with the use of or diminish the value of adjacent properties and neighborhoods. So those were 2 that had a lot of discussion in those based on the prior cases as well as the comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Ullman?
If I may just kind of make a note towards Gary Pittsford's question about who was involved with that what was the Monroe County State Road 37 corridor plan. I was able to locate it, and in the acknowledgement, they give notice of 8 people that were in the guided of planning process. Of the 8 people, 6 of them were from the Plan Commission at the time, or were in the planning department. The additional was a resident and Monroe County Highway engineer. So I'm happy to forward those names to you if you would like, Derek.
Thank you. I'd also appreciate that. And I see that the Foundation for Sustainable Futures was consulted on this, and this was an organization, or still is an organization, out of Lanesville, Indiana, that is, the registered agent is Denise Pease. So I think that answers some of the questions that we have. Are there any other questions from members of the Plan Commission? Okay, Mr. Carmen, thank you for being patient.
Mike Carmen, representing petitioner, but Jackie, if we can, Mr. Height should be on Zoom with the raised hand. Petitioner Martin Height is A&H and S&H LLC. That's Mr. Height, and has been the owner of this property through the development Worms Way to date.
So would we like to hear from him first or
Yes,
you
please.
first? Okay, so if you could unmute Mr. Height, and thank you, Mr. Height, for showing up and continuing to further your property. So if you would, you and Mr. Carmen combined have 15 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you for everybody showing up to this important meeting. I believe this is the last chance to put a profitable business into this valuable commercial property. I would like to begin with, if you could bring up our petitioner's letter. I want to comment about a few things in that letter that would be useful.
Okay, we have that up before us.
I think it's very important to point out that Worms Way was established in 1995, and in 1997, when Oliver Winery and the BP gas station were giving pre-existing business designations, Worms Way should have been included in that. I realize this commission is not here to vote on that matter, but this would not even be necessary if Worms Way was recognized as a pre-existing business at that time. Number two is, and I want to give Mike time to speak and give you time for questions, but if you could bring up the zoning, the conforming uses in the ag zone, because this may shed some clarification on this.
One moment, let me pull that up.
The zoning table that was included in the packet, it's got the ag zoning, conforming uses.
Mr. Myers is bringing that up.
While he's doing that, let me comment on the highway study done in 2010.
Yes.
Note that it says that Worms Way should be allowed to remain there. Now, no one had a crystal ball in 2010, or else they would have included it. Gee, if Worms Way goes out of business, these buildings should be allowed to be there. It's a commercial property. It's been built. It makes no sense to tear it down. So I just wanted to comment on that. Okay, here's the crux of the matter that's been presented at the BZA meetings, the two petitions, and at the rezone. The ag zone has about 50 uses here. 90% of them are not viable on these 13 acres because of the value of the property, and 90% for all various reasons. That all comes down to dollars, but some of these businesses would never use 54,000 square feet of commercial buildings. So why would you buy them and never use them? For instance, a Christmas tree farm or aquaculture or, a feedlot. Other uses would say, well, there's not enough space here. 12 acres, I don't know anybody that would start up a Christmas tree farm on 12 acres. Well, put it this way, if you could buy 12 acres for, I don't know, $12,000, maybe you would, but all of this comes down to dollars. In the 7 years the property's been listed for sale, not one single offer from any of these conforming uses, not one, nothing. So the property wastes away for 7 years, and I hear people say, well, let's include this in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan, the CDO, was supposed to be out in, I don't know, 2021, maybe previous to that, but I would venture to say it won't be completed in 2024. I would also say, someone suggested maybe a rezone would be reasonable. We tried rezoning to light industrial. If you're suggesting, why not try to rezone for general business? Why not try to rezone for something? That's what the PUO is about. You've got six or seven uses in this type of property that makes use of the commercial buildings, and that you would have to, it has to be an established business. There is no startup business anywhere that could purchase this type of property and start up. In round numbers, and I have several parties that are interested in buying, but in round numbers, buying both lots, you need $300,000 a year free cash flow to meet your mortgage, interest, and building expenses. That's not the business. That's not, employees and benefits and utilities and on and on and on, advertise, everything that goes into a business. But there is no startup business in the world that has that kind of money to start a business. Therefore, it has to be an established business. Somebody who says, you know what, I have cash flow. I can handle this with the bank. I need the space. I want to use it. It's not going to detract from the values from anybody close by in no way, shape, or form. Many of the houses that were built in Windsor Private were built after 1995. People bought lots, built houses, and never looked up and said, gee, these 3 buildings over here are detracting from my value. I understood when I-69 was coming in, people would say, that might detract from my value as a homeowner. I'm against it. I understand that. I would definitely say, I don't think there's any studies or any proof that I-69 has detracted from your home value. And, that just remains to be seen with the market. But I want to say again, if anybody on this commission or staff pick something on this conforming use, pick any one of them. And like I said, 90% of them don't apply. Who does apply? Government use, utility use. They have cash flow and they could afford this. But in 7 years, there's been no utility company. There's been no government use. Monroe County is looking for a new jail. They're not looking at the property. In other words, it doesn't exist. Things like two-family dwelling or anything that tried to use these buildings, unless they're as is and you understand them, then you're going to invest further into this property before you would use it. People that are looking at it saying, hey, I can use the buildings as they are, go in and do some cleaning or something. But as far as adding onto the buildings or building new buildings or retrofitting a building to fit something that I was going to do, a taxidermist. I realize this chart was made a long time ago, and I realize the new CDO may adjust some of these things, but it's a pipe dream, or it doesn't fit this property, despite the ag zoning, for a business to occupy this property, unless you are an established business and that you understand cash flow. No startup business is going to say, yeah, I'm thinking about, opening a taxidermy deal. One other thing I did investigate, because it's on here, and I'll try to get along. Okay, a solar farm. Yeah, I looked into a solar farm for the property. It's a 20-year payback. If you invest $2 million in solar, and in 20 years, you'll get you $2 million back. That's not the price of the property. That's in 20-year payback to install a solar farm on this property. I'm not in a position, nor would I ever dream of investing $2 million for 20 years to break even. So I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Mike Carmen, and let's see if he has anything to add. I appreciate your time this evening. I respectfully request that you give this a positive recommendation so the commissioners can vote and we can determine if this is even possible.
Thank you, Mr. Height. And thank you, Mr. Carmen, also for being here.
We've got, about 5 minutes left? Okay. So a few comments more. Martin gave you the history of the property and what he sees as an owner. And I think the Judy Sharp assessment letter speaks to his concern. The Ag R zoning stripped the property of its value. You've got good condition, very good condition, quality buildings out there that are wasting away. They cannot be used. Nobody will use them and pay the price for that. So let's look at the zoning ordinance then. First of all, the Corda study that was referred to, and you've talked about who sanctioned that, et cetera, was pretty specific about the concept of further development along the highway. They show the zoning map and they talk about the surrounding zones briefly. They didn't talk about PB zone immediately to the north of this, adjacent to other, in fact, adjacent to the north end of this, our neighbors here, who the subdivision has pre-existing business to the north of it. We've got pre-existing business to the west of that. We've got Thompson Furniture that was given LI zoning down the way. We've got LB zoning south of this for the old BP station and the Nature's Way building down there. We've got Bloomington Auto Parts, which happen to be hit with an AGR zone, but it's never going to go away. They can't afford to go away because nobody's going to pay to clean it up. So it's there for our lifetimes unless the federal government comes in and does an EPA cleanup on it. There's no other way it ever disappears. That's life on this corridor. And we've got buildings. So why PUD? There is no zone that does not have permitted uses in that zone that you would not want out there. There is no zone that is going to be approved by you or the Board of Commissioners because there's going to be uses permitted in that zone that you're going to say we don't want there, whether it's a gas station, a trucking terminal, it's just not possible. So you look at a PUD because that's an opportunity to shed those undesirable uses and focus on what works and what fits there. So it's a blend of uses from the different zones, but every one of them can be conducted on an appropriate scale within the existing buildings, which is a condition set out in the proposed PUD outline plan. All business operations are interior, no exterior business operations. Make use of the existing buildings, live with the existing parking, and live with the existing infrastructure. On a perfect road for this, Wayport Road does not go through any neighborhood. It doesn't even touch on a neighborhood. We do have one house that lives in between the ramp for 69 and Wayport Road. I don't remember the name of the owner down there, right off the cul-de-sac. Not cul-de-sac, the roundabout down there. But essentially, Wayport Road, which is a state highway quality road, great construction on that, carries all traffic from there to Sample Road, which has gone through massive improvements, onto 69. Traffic does not affect any neighborhood. Martin made the comment about construction. If you look at the 8 lots that have houses closest to this property, 2 of them, I believe, had construction dates in 1992, 1 or 2 for 1993, and then we get 2000, 2004, 2007. The point being, these existing buildings, this site in existence, did not deter people from investing significantly into building their homes on those lots, which says a lot by itself. The distance from these buildings to the nearest structure is several hundred feet. There can't be no building built closer than what exists right now. If you look at the subdivision there, about a third of that is built. Houses have been built that could not be built today. They are all they lack the buildable area. There's severe slope restrictions over there. But the houses were built, the subdivision was platted, houses were allowed. But if you apply the ordinance strictly, tell them to vacate those homes because they're built on areas where they can't have a home. But you're not going to do that. I'm not asking you to. Wouldn't expect you to do that. But that's what you're telling Mr. Hyde with this property, that these buildings got built and we're not going to let you, because of zoning orders, make use of them. And it's just not practical. So the PUD does that. The constraint that even, you might say, well, pet services or terminal allows for uses that are too big. They have to fit the scale of living within the existing building and within the existing allowed parking, because there's no proposal to change that. Live within that. So the uses fit. The PUD allows the opportunity to make appropriate use of existing substantial commercial construction that's been there for many years, and the neighborhood is developed around it without any hindrance. It does not negatively affect the surrounding properties. We've asked for your support in getting this matter finally resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carmen. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to the public comments. If there are members of the public who are in favor of this petition, please come to the podium and sign in. Or if you're online, raise your virtual hand on Zoom. Or if you're calling in by telephone, please press *9. We see no one. And could you see if any of the panelists, if Cheryl or I don't know if Julie will be able to join us, Commissioner Thomas, at any point. But okay, so we're moving on to the public now who is opposed to this petition. And we have a number of people in the room and a number of people online. And each person has 3 minutes to come to the podium, sign in, and give your testimony in opposition to this petition.
Good evening. Let me sing this. My name is Randy Barnes. I'm president of the Homeowners Association at Windsor Private.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes, for coming again. If you could reset his time when he begins, he's still signing in. Yes, okay.
I would like to point out that we have not opposed everything that's been brought up for this property. We opposed storing tar right next to our retention pond. We've opposed 24/7 truck traffic. We're trying to be reasonable. The one thing we approved was basically knocked down, I believe, by planning, by insisting on another $100,000 worth of landscaping by the potential owner. I don't understand what that was about. Maybe I'm new to the property, so I'm sorry I live 700 feet away, but I've got 3.5 acres and that's my backyard. And I don't want tar stored back there. I don't want hazardous chemicals. I don't want 24/7 truck traffic. We already have enough trouble with the winery. I mean, they've gotten to become a very serious business over the few years. Mr. Height talked about us making, or his attorney talked about us making poor decisions in building next to Worms Way. Well, I'd point out that Mr. Height maybe made a bad decision renting to Worms Way and to continue building for them when they went out of business. I just would like to see some reasonable business move into this, and I don't believe there has been a really fair attempt to do that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. And let the record reflect that Commissioner Thomas had joined the meeting before the testimony. So if the next person who is in opposition to this petition would come to the podium and sign in, and you'll also have 3 minutes.
Signed in here. Okay, thank you. My name is Brian Booz. I'm a resident in Windsor Private, been there for 24 years probably now. And I submitted, it got added today. This is probably something you just got today, which is unfortunate you just got it today because I probably haven't had a chance to read it yet. But I'm going to paraphrase from it because it states what I'm after here. There's 3 things that I would like to oppose this on. One is I think the PUD concepts being applied is a latch-ditch effort. There are 3 general ways: rezoning, a variance, and a PUD. The other 2 didn't make it. This is the 3rd one of the triad. It's being tried. It's being modified beyond what a PUD normally would be considered a tool for, but it's the 3rd and last option to be used, and I think that's the reason a PUD is being proposed here. I don't think it's the right use for a PUD. It's being proposed at a time when there is the revision of the comprehensive plan, COD, COE, whatever the thing is, that's ongoing. Presumably that's going to conclude before too long, hopefully. This looks to me like an effort to slip this in before that happens in case the rezone of the new plan that covers that whole area doesn't allow this. Let's go ahead and get this PUD in there now and as a safeguard against it if the larger effort doesn't go that way. I think that's another reason why the PUD is in front of you right now. And I don't think that's a good reason when you have a more comprehensive plan already being evaluated. This is an early shortcut around it in case it doesn't go their way. And finally, there's been a lot of talk about, the buildings and the value and this and that. Mr. Height ran a successful company, Worms Way, for a long time. He made a lot of business decisions for his private company. A lot of those decisions generated a lot of benefits for the company, for the owner, for the employees, and that's wonderful. That's the way it's supposed to go. And knowing exactly how it was zoned. In fact, he was involved in getting that 1995 zoning, which allowed it to go forward in the first place in a way that helped him. That ran for a while. Then he made another well-educated decision to sell the business, but keep the properties. So the business that was generating the money that paid for all these expensive properties that he purposely put on there, that went away by choice. Keep the properties, sell the business. Now he's left with the burden of the properties. And we'll hear from others about whether or not his efforts to sell it have been realistic or not. But he made that decision knowing exactly how it was zoned, exactly how much money he'd put in it, everything about it. He was well aware. It's a private company. He makes his own decisions. He kept the burdens, the expensive part, sold the business, and after several tries to dump that somehow off, all these efforts are an effort to shift those burdens of his own corporate decisions now to the county and us residents of the county. You know, he did everything fully well aware of how things were zoned, what was going on, kept the expensive part, acts like that somehow just happened to him. It didn't. Those were all conscious decisions that he made along the way. He's unhappy with them now. And this whole effort is to shift then the burden, change the rules around it so it can sell under some other criteria and get himself out from under those burdens. I disagree with that. I don't think the county should take on burdens of his privately well-educated decisions that now have baggage associated with them.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Booz. Thanks for coming again.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if there's another member of the public who would like to speak, please come to the podium and sign in.
Before I do that, can I give you a
Sure,
handout that I
sure. And if you'd be sure to give one to staff, or we'll pass one down to staff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. If you could save one for Jackie and Drew.
Okay, my name is Julia Booz, and I am a local realtor here in Bloomington. We all know that Price sells the property. That's been a known fact. Mr. Haidt has not marketed this property, as you can see on this handout. He is listed as the broker. He listed it through One Avenue, LoopNet. If you look on the second page, you'll see circled in red, he has consistently listed 2 buildings, B and C, as industrial. The property has never been zoned for industrial, but Mr. Haidt has tried over and over to sell it as an industrial property, and he has priced it as an industrial property. If you look on the next page, you'll see down at the bottom the date. These are 2 times I showed this property to 2 specific buyers that would have fit the zoning for the current zoning on this property. But price was a major factor. And for what the buildings are, and some of them, like Building A's condition, they did not feel that they were not interested in it at that price. And they were so far apart, they didn't feel that they could even put an offer on it. So they did not buy it. If you look at the next one, you'll see also industrial. These were back in 2020 and 2021 when I showed these properties. He consistently advertises that way. He has never hired a commercial local realtor to market this property. And there's probably a good reason for it, because they probably would not have taken it, because a realtor is sworn to uphold the code of ethics in truth in advertising to the public, because that's important. We have to do that, and we're sworn to do that. But Mr. Haidt is not. He's basically a for sale by owner. He may have a broker's license. I'm not sure. But we can't do that, and we wouldn't do that to the public. But as you can see on these papers, he has done it for years. And because of that, it has not sold. I'm sure there's been several commercial realtors that have seen it. LoopNet is a popular place to advertise, and I'm sure they've seen it. So I have to wonder, why didn't they buy it? Well, they probably looked it up, and a good realtor first will go and look to see what the zoning is and what they can use it for. How can we sell it Well, when they look it up and it shows on here that it's industrial, but they see that it's ag, they blow past it because they can't sell it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Booz. Thanks for coming out again. And I'm going to turn now to somebody who's online on Zoom. And Ms. Druckmiller, if tech staff could unmute her, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I too am a realtor, and I also live behind Worms Way. I am the house that is the closest to Worms Way. And to Mr. Carmen's comment about buying a home with Worms Way there, that was not an issue because Worms Way didn't emit any smells, odors, or any kind of noise. So it wasn't noticeable. What new zoning can do will add a lot of those features. Therefore, that changes a lot for my backyard. Also, as a realtor, I did reach out to Mr. Height once. I had a church that was very interested in maybe leasing the property. Mr. Height went on to tell me that he was not in the business to lease the property, which I understand that, but we had just kind of heard that maybe, hard terms and some income would be better than no income. But Mr. Height was not interested in doing so. So I did not bring an offer because I took his information back to my client. So therefore we couldn't really make an offer if he wasn't interested in leasing at least one of the buildings to the church. So with that, when he says that he hasn't had anyone, there have been people that have approached him, just hasn't been what he's wanted. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Druckmiller. Okay, we will return to the room here and then we'll go back to Zoom. If you would kindly sign in and.
Hi, my name's Andrew Long and I'm a resident of Windsor Private. As a Monroe County resident, we're constantly fighting this issue. We've been here many times, as you know. All these different rezones and requests are getting very tiring for everybody, I think. Mr. Carmen says that no neighborhoods are affected by Wayport Road. That is totally not true. We ride our bikes down there. There's families walking along there on the side of the road. And any increase in traffic due to a business is going to make that a lot more dangerous for families and the neighborhood. The owner of the property has repeatedly tried to sell the property, and he's been less than honest in his description, as Julie said. He needs to realize this property is zoned rural reserve and agricultural, and that attempts to rezone it don't align with the comprehensive plan or the local residents or the local area. Whether it's asphalt, metal fabrication, construction, storage yards, or other uses, these are all previously denied by the county. And now the owner is trying to get around this by doing a PUD, which includes these same use cases. So having services like pet services or religious activities, that's not even going to work because he's already said it will be 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. There's no churches who meet during the week, during the day, so it's limited. And other use cases have already been denied. It's not up to the county to find a way for the owner to sell at a high price. It's not the county's responsibility to make exceptions for him. It's up to the county to protect residents. It was a nice speech from the owner, but it's not our fault or the county's fault that this property is inappropriate for the zone. Also, that if the owner wants to reduce his asking price to a reasonable level, then it may sell, as Julie said. The owner needs to accept that he's made his huge profits over the years of Worms Way, and it's time to sell the property for closer to the assessed value. This is a residential, agricultural, and rural area, not a business and industrial area. Rezoning to PUD, which allows business use cases that have already been denied, is inappropriate, and I'm requesting that you please deny this rezone request and any future rezone requests. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Thank you. And I'm going to switch now to Mr. Lauren Aubin on Zoom. If tech staff could unmute Lauren Aubin. And you will have 3 minutes. I believe you're unmuted. If you, maybe you have to push an unmute button on your side, but you're unmuted on our side, Lorne Aubin. We're not seeing that. Okay, we will return to Lorne Aubin after another person who is in the room would like to come to the podium and speak for 3 minutes in opposition to this case. Thank you. If you would kindly sign in.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jose Salazar. I am the house that lives right directly behind Worms Way in front. And we have 5 acres, and we really do not want any more traffic going through there. We are very opposed to it. We feel that given this such a broad view of what the business they want in there, I just don't feel safe. Who's gonna be there? You know? And to see the kind of business they want to get in there, if you have a general contractor and he's going with asphalt or whatever is there, I don't want that smell right into my house. I really don't, you know? So I am totally against this. I hope you take this in consideration of all of us, that we are feeling the pressure of the landlord, that he wants to sell it. It's not our problem. He chose to do his business as he did. Okay, that's my point.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. Thank you. Yes, Mr.
Salazar, I didn't hear the first part of your introduction. You live in Windsor Private, is that correct?
I do. I live
Okay.
on 7951 North Ames Drive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we don't see Lorne Aubin anymore online. So if the next person in the room who is in opposition to the petition, if you would kindly come to the podium and sign in.
I'll leave a note in the chat on how Lauren could reconnect.
Okay, and if there's anybody online who is on Zoom, please raise your virtual hand on Zoom in order to be recognized to speak. Or if you are calling in by phone, please press *9 to be recognized to speak. And I'm just reviewing here to see if there's anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this petition. I see Lorne Aubin has signed in again, and we'll see if Lorne Aubin
Can you hear
has
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, my goodness.
So you have 3 minutes.
It's not gonna work. Dadgummit.
I think we can hear you. Oh, I think he signed off again.
I'm not sure what's happening with their audio.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Garitas?
If maybe I could fill the gap until Mr. Auburn gets back on the
Yes,
line. A
yes.
question for staff.
Yes.
If I can ask this.
Yes.
A couple of the neighbors had talked about the traffic. There is no traffic that's coming through Windsor Private into the development. Is that correct? Everything has access off of I-69?
That's correct. The petition site has access to Wayport Road, which does not go through Windsor Private.
Yeah, okay. And then the other question, can I ask Mr.
Sure.
Can I ask Mr. Long a question directly? Is that
Sure.
okay with you?
Sure. And Mr. Long, if you would kindly come back to the podium.
Yes.
Hi, sir. I read your email, and it says that you've retained an attorney.
No, I said that Windsor Private was going to retain an
Well,
attorney.
I'm sorry, excuse me. It's your
Yeah.
email, and you say the neighborhood is.
Yeah, I'm not
retained.
sure if that's actually happened yet.
Okay.
At the time, it was in process.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify whether or not you were being represented or not.
Not at this time, and I can't speak for
I
the
understand.
HOA.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Long. That's okay. He was long. Mr. Long. Okay. Okay, so, okay, Mr. Aubin has already signed on again, so if tech staff could unmute. There we go. If we could try again.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 3 minutes.
Fantastic. Goodness gracious. My apologies for my failed computer skills. So a question. Arnold Asphalt has tried to get clearance or variance through this committee to buy the property. If this PUD was approved, would they be allowed under the general contractor classification to basically sidestep what has been denied in the past?
So they had requested a use variance for general contractor for this property, but if they were to obtain approval for this PUD, it would include the list of general contractor. So yes, it would allow for someone like Arnold Contractors or Arnold Asphalt to obtain a site plan approval.
Thank you for answering that question. So earlier, the comments have been made by the petitioner that the neighbors built after Worms Way was in existence. So in 1995, Windsor Private did support Worms Way going in. In 1999, my wife and I'm lifelong resident of Bloomington, moved away for 4 years, came back. In 1999, we were looking for property. When I looked at the area, I knew that Worms Way was agriculture. I knew that Oliver Winery was there. And so based on those two factors, that they were zoned the way that they were, we went ahead and built our home in Windsor Private. Now, the reassessment of Worms Way property closely matches the assessed value of my home, which causes me to scratch my head significantly. But in an earlier petition, when I spoke before the zoning board, the question was asked, if there was industrial or general contractors, would I have bought my property and built in Windsor Private? And the answer was no. And for what it's worth, you can go back and check the record. So it will impact whether or not people move into the neighborhood. I'm sitting in my dining room and I see Worms Way. The concern is any concern regarding the cemetery that's on Worms Way property, any consideration for Joe and his grandchildren who live there off of Sample Road, who property was divided by the I-69 project. Any consideration for Oliver Winery? I mean, it's a destination in the Midwest. What impact, I don't know, does turning this over to other uses have? And that's the question before the zoning board. What do you want Bloomington to look like when people drive down I-69 and come into Bloomington? And what impact, if any, does this have on Oliver Winery and that successful business? So based on those issues, I request that it be denied.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Aubin. Thank you for your, keeping on trying to connect. Thank you. And so we turn now to the petitioner and the petitioner's representative for a 5-minute rebuttal. Mr. Carmen. Yes.
Jackie, does Mr. Hyde have his hand raised?
Yes, he does. Mr. Height, if he could be unmuted. You and Mr. Carmen have 5 minutes total together. And so I think he has to be unmuted.
Mr. Height, if you would go ahead and unmute. There you go.
He's unmuted.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Thank you. I'll just make a few comments to the commission. Number one, the industrial listing that's on LoopNet, that doesn't describe the zoning. It's the type of buildings that they are. They are industrial type buildings. A limitation, and you're listing with a service online, they're going to plug you in somewhere. At no point have I ever told anybody who approached me on this property, and I've had in the 7 years, probably 60, 70, 80 companies approach me. At no point did I say it's zoned industrial. That would be ridiculous. If we could bring up Andy Peterson's letter, it was in the packet. It was the last page.
Are you
I'll
finished?
talk about the price.
Yeah.
No, why?
We're having, I think that this is breaking up a little bit. Sometimes there's intermittent silence. Mr. Height, are you still there? Okay, so Mr. Carmen.
A couple of points. You have to read the plan. We had one remonstrator who acknowledged the hours of operation issue. We have somebody else who's complaining about 24-hour truck traffic, totally ignoring hours of operation as a condition, as a restriction on the use. I don't never believe it's productive to do finger pointing and malign people's professional integrity. I'm troubled by accusations being less than honest, particularly coming from realtors. If they've done this business at all, then they know, as your man sitting here knows, any offer to purchase for a property like this is going to have contingencies, one of which is obtaining all necessary governmental permits and approvals for intended use. Nobody's going to be tricked into buying industrial property that's not zoned for that, because they're going to have the opportunity to cancel the contract because it's going to be a contingency that says subject to first getting zoning approval for their intended use. And if they don't get it, no contract. It is inappropriate to malign professional integrity. And I just move on. I do not believe I said people made a bad decision to build in Windsor Private. In fact, I think I was trying to say quite the opposite. They made appropriate decisions because this property, the Worms Bay property, did not adversely impact those properties, is why they were safe to invest in building their homes there. And we had one of them even acknowledge that. Worms Bay was not a problem. They didn't smell it, didn't that. And that's the use conditions we have in here of interior operations. They throw out the name Arnold Asphalt as fear-mongering. If Arnold Asphalt can operate entirely with inside of a building, then more power to them. If he can. But there's no provision for stockpiling asphalt provision because that's exterior operations. I mean, it just, this was PUD proposal was intentionally thought out to what fits consistent with Worms Way having fit there and allow the development of the adjacent properties. So do these uses, restricted to interior operations, restricted to buildings that are there, restricted with hours of operation. It constrains the use to the things that fit that do not adversely impact the neighbors, and would ask you to keep that in mind. And Margaret, I don't know where I am on time, but if I have 30 seconds, I'll wrap up.
Yeah, you do. You have 30, yes.
All right. So, the comment was made about the property needs to fit the zoning. Mr. Height's original comments, where he started was, the zoning should have fit the property too. It was in existence, and it was done to fit for the old Brown School and CFCs and the use there. It was done to fit Oliver Winery. It was done to fit Thompson Furniture. It was done to fit the PP station. It was not done to fit this property.
Mr.
And
Height
that's a concern.
Mr. Height is back on if we want to have him speak.
Thank you, Mr. Carmen. And so, Mr. Height, if there was an interruption in your transmission, if there's something final that you would like to say?
I'm now unmuted. Yeah,
we can hear you.
I know we lost each other, so I didn't hear.
We can hear you
You
now,
can hear me
Mr.
now?
Height. We can hear you.
Okay. I was in the middle of discussing Andy Peterson's letter. If we could bring that up again.
Yes, the letter is before us.
Okay, I can't see it yet. It's coming up. Anyway, Mr. Andy Peterson is a local realtor, and as his letter states, that's not price that's holding up his buyer. It is the zoning. So I wasn't sure if I got through on the fact that I've never listed the site as industrial. It's the type of buildings that they are. And that's a limitation when you some property online. They pigeonhole you where you belong. But under of the 70 or 80 people I had,
Okay, Mr. Hyde, I'm sorry, the connection must be unstable, and I'm going to turn to Mr. Carmen to see if you could finish his thought for him, and then the rebuttal will be
I
finished.
appreciate the offer, but I don't think I can finish
I think he was saying that he had 7 offers on the property, and
which is what he talked about very early on about.
Yes, yes. Okay, well, thank you so much. I think we understand what you're trying to say, Mr. Height, and Mr. Carmen represented you well. So we will turn now to the Plan Commission for discussion and/or a motion. Mr. Cockerham.
Yes, I'm a non-voting member, but I have a couple of comments. First off, LoopNet with Mrs. Booz, they do allow for principals and owners to list on there. So I think the email that was in here stated him as the broker, but this system does allow for property owners to list on there. A couple things. So like Mrs. Booz talked about, commercial brokerage and brokerage, and I do only commercial. So the first thing we do, as Jackie knows, is I call to find out the zoning and trying to find the highest and best use within that zoning. However, sometimes the highest and best use doesn't fit the zoning, and that's for a body like this, for him to come and ask for changes and for us to decide that. So I commend him for asking and searching for the highest and best use, whether this group decides that this is it or not. The one question I do have, Jackie, is the other properties that were zoned pre-existing business and this one was not, do we know the history on why this one was left out of pre-existing business?
Yeah, I think Drew's report did a nice job of highlighting some of the history of this parcel, but it was given a special exception back around, was it 1995? And so when we did the rezone in 1997, my guess is that they didn't want to disrupt that special exception, or they thought that was a use that could carry forward and it worked within the agricultural district. PB was a zoning designation that was put on properties that had a business use that otherwise they didn't want that business use to expand to other properties nearby. It was sort of a placeholder to say these properties are limited in their business capacity. They can expand, but we don't want other properties in the near vicinity to also be a business use. It doesn't fit the comprehensive plan. We understand that those businesses exist. We don't want to take away their privileges as a business, but they're limited. And so this site was just zoned agricultural rural reserve. I went back and looked at the previous zoning, and that's what it was zoned prior. And then in the proposed, which is now the 1997 zoning map, it was still Ag RR.
And I know this is hypothetical, but if the owner, it sounds like the owner might have asked to keep the ag, but if we were looking at that, I mean, is there a zoning class that this business would have fit into if it was pre-existing, that it could carry on?
So it is zoned Ag RR, and the special exception was for, was it agribusiness was a specific use, and I believe that use is still a possible use under 802, but we will.
And in fact, that area of work and interest in our community is growing, agribusiness.
And I think to your other point and to the petitioner representative point, if this would have been zoned pre-existing business, how that would have worked is we would have looked at what the use intensity was in the chapter. And so let's say it was agricultural uses, non-animal, for instance, and that's a high intensity use. They would be granted the ability to switch from another business use that's a similar or lesser intensity. So it depends on how they would have been categorized at that time. They were not categorized as pre-existing business, but I just provided you with that example since that was brought up.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Are there other members of the Plan Commission who have questions? Or I see Mr. Enright Randolph. I'll continue on my right here and we'll go down the line.
Questions and comments, right? We're kind of in the second part of this.
Well, you can do either, Mr. Enright Randolph.
Well, I mean, I kind of,
or both.
it goes back to our admin. Like, really, what are we asking the petitioner to do with this property? Are we asking him to tear down the buildings and convert it back to the zone? It's a pretty big ask there, in my opinion. So I heard speakers that had spoken about there has to be some type of use that could fit this character of the county. I'm very curious of what type of use that may be, and maybe kind of what the petitioner's thoughts are on that. I guess what I'm really getting to is that we don't waive the final hearing and we do bring this back for another discussion, because I can just only imagine if, you know, I owned a piece of property and my only option was to tear down the buildings and lose almost $2 million of assessed value. Also, I don't want to take Jerry's thunder, but with that corridor study, we had representation from the commissioners, from the Plan Commission, and from private consultants that all identified this as a operational commercial use. So that speaks loudly to me. Also, at one of our CDO listening meetings, we were looking at another piece of property that when we went through the last rezone of the county, it was missed. Just, I think, adjacent properties were zoned correctly and theirs wasn't. And it could have been an overlooked. I'm not saying this is an overlooked, but it kind of feels the same, that this has been used as a commercial viable use, and now we've really kind of hamstrung them in a sense where there is no more options, and they exhaust their options. It was talking about shifting burden. I think there's an onerous burden on all property owners in Monroe County because we have a very strenuous ordinance and also other overlays and ordinance that relate to that. So I don't think it's shifting the burden. I think it's just kind of where we're at in time, and we need to figure out the best use of the property. And I don't think the best use of the property is bringing a bulldozer in there and just tearing down the buildings. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Enright Randolph. Mr. Pittsford.
Yeah, is that okay? It's working all right. This one, never know exactly what I'm doing with this, if I'm turning it on or turning it off. South of this property on the other side of 69, we had a petition on Bell Road for a rezone. What was the request for that? Was it to go to Ag RR?
Yes, that request for that, it was a winery and they were requesting to go from.
Right, the winery,
Yeah,
right.
to agricultural.
And what, we voted in support of that, correct? We forwarded that with a favorable recommendation?
Yes, I believe the Plan Commission forwarded it with a positive recommendation.
And what was the end result of that?
The county commissioners denied the petition 2-1, I believe.
Okay, so down the road from this, someone wanted Ag RR, and it was denied. Now, up the road, on the opposite side of the road, it is Ag RR. They want to change it, and they can't change it. Seems like a heck of a paradox, doesn't it? That's rough. Because, I mean, if I owned that property, I wouldn't know which way to go. But next point I'd like to make, the State Road 37 corridor plan is interesting because it's not even, I'm not 100% clear, because it says, furthermore, the lack of frontage roads, that was what they anticipated, would make it inadvisable to develop along the 37 corridor in this area. Is there a lack of frontage roads on 69? Do we see a lack of the ability to support business on the frontage of 69?
Wayport Road provides frontage to the
Okay,
petition site.
is it sufficient to support something other than Ag RR?
I'd have to double check what the classification of Wayport Road is. I think it might be a collector roadway.
Because that's an important question to answer. Because when you consider best and highest use, the infrastructure is part of that equation. Is it appropriately supported? So my question is, will Wayport Road appropriately support something other than Ag RR? And if it does, that should be a consideration. And I don't know if that's really occurred. That study also continues to say, this plan is encouraging employment sites to be directed to previously developed areas where they are permitted by current planning policies. So my question was employment encouraged by current planning policies on this property in 2010? Because then it says, and that employment sites be directed away from undeveloped portions of the State Road 37 corridor. This seems to be developed, and it seems to be employment in 2010, which would indicate that the State Road 37 corridor study would actually support a change in zoning in order for employment to continue on this property, right? Am I right there? That's a question. It's a serious question. Am I right? Is that a logical conclusion?
I think based on that section, yes, there's a little bit of conflicting information in this corridor
Right,
study, and of course, this
right.
was prior to the build-out of 69.
So by my interpretation, it both tends to support and discourage in the same sentence. So do we get to choose which part we use?
Well, so are you finished, or do you
I'm
have
done.
more? Okay,
For what
so-
it's worth, on the screen now is the site conditions section from the staff report that talks about Wayport Road being listed as a major collector roadway, and that the site does not exhibit any sidewalks. The site is serviced by Washington Township Water and REMC for electrical utilities, and there's no floodplain designated and environmental constraints overlay on the property. So this section is in the packet. And also commercial septic, yes.
Okay, just one last, and this is kind of a comment. The purpose of this board, a planning commission, is to look at properties and try to determine best and highest use. Our decisions are not necessarily solely to be based on the financial impacts on the property owning petitioner or on the adjacent properties either. We're to look at what is the best use for this property in terms of the benefit to the county. That's my understanding. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pittsford. And I'm going to start at the end of the table, Mr. Ullman.
Thank you. So one of the things that I really, when I started processing the information on this and started looking at this, I was brought back to one of our recent CDO listening sessions as we're working through the comprehensive plan. And we had a gentleman speak from, I believe it was Business Development of Monroe County. I forget his official title, but he spoke a lot about where Monroe County can grow businesses and all the things that we have to attract business from the airport, from the school, from the city, from our proximity to bigger cities like Indianapolis, the interstate. And the list went on and on. And one of the things that was referenced was the business and industrial overlay. Drew or Jackie, would you mind just briefly giving what exactly the business or industrial overlay is?
Sure. The business or industrial overlay was highlighting different agricultural zone properties that could be switched to industrial use in the future. It's not over all of the agricultural zone properties, but it was specific to certain agricultural zone properties.
Yeah. And when I went and looked at the business and industrial overlay, which I encourage everybody to take a look at where that overlay falls, I would argue that a lot of that area falls in area that is better classified as rural and agriculture, with a small exception of where the 3769 interchange is on the south side of the town, or south side of Bloomington. That really falls out past Ellettsville towards the county line, where, you know, keeping our agricultural integrity I would see as more valuable than this particular lot that is currently designated as ag. Most of the BIO is also a vast majority, I forget the exact percentage, vast majority does fall on ag-RR land. And here I see a situation that it is currently infrastructured to better cater for business and industrial, but instead the BIO encourages us to look at ag-RR that is currently in row crop, more expansive land, and create infrastructure there to promote business and industrial. And I kind of have a bit of a gripe with that and don't see eye to eye with that. In the same light, I also want to point out that some of the comments we heard made note of smell and sounds and what Worms Way brought to the area, and how there was a lack of smell and sounds, and some of the arguments made against other industries that might come in. But if this tract of land is to remain in ag-RR, there is a fair share of uses in the use table that would be allowed on this land that would create what I would consider a substantial amount of smell or sound, greater than that would be allowed with the exceptions that are being requested. Some of those being a confined feeding operation. I don't think the neighboring landowners would want 7,000 head of cattle in their backyard. You know, a composting operation, an ag sale barn, or a stockyard. All of those, from my agricultural background, I would argue will create a significant greater impact to neighboring landowners than the ones being suggested. Those are just some of the things I'm processing, and I wanted to share with the rest of the Plan Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Ullman. Mr. Garatas?
Yeah, I think I think that Tron's suggestion that we're going to see this again is probably a good one. So I think that maybe just some comments I'm not going to get too deep on them. One, I think that we've got an opportunity here to see a site that is existing now. We don't have to guess what the setbacks are going to be. We don't have to guess what the buffers are going to be. There's a huge buffer yard. I mean, if you take the time to know the property, and then just even to see staff's pictures, you see the location of truck docks, you see the grassy area, you see the trees on the east and the north side. You know, you've got the Forney property on the south, which is immediately adjacent to the salvage yard, I guess, for lack of a better term. I think that the placement of this site, knowing what it is, with, as I understand it, the commitment that the petitioner is making with all of it being contained, to me makes it significantly less intrusive than what we would find on the ag list. And just a couple other lists would be a sawmill or a green compost yard or the greenfield area. I mean, those are just a couple. The ag rural reserve uses can be very intense. I don't know that there are any surprises when you look at the truck docks and you look at what the turning radiuses are on the pavement, how the trucks got in and out, that the neighbors would see much of a difference between what this was in its initial primary use, when houses at Windsor Private were going in, when this site was being built, and the 37 corridor was there, and the plan that Jerry spoke about a little while ago was being evaluated. So I think we've got an opportunity to see what this site has evolved into after almost, 30 years, I guess. I made this comment at the very beginning. This property has been very well kept, very well maintained. And getting a use in there that's viable, I think, promotes that for everybody. We talk about the corridor plan. We look at what's going on with I-69. I think that that's an asset to the public. I think a user in there that does bring the property value up to where the property tax revenue can be increased probably goes a little bit to what Jerry may be talking about. I think the key thing about the comprehensive plan is a broad brush of what the county is proposing at the time it's put in place. The zoning ordinance specifically targets uses and what's supposed to happen on that property based on what the unique characteristics of it are. But the comprehensive plan does its job in saying in this area, it paints it red and some hues of pink and fuchsia and all these other magical colors that give us a concept of what guidance we're supposed to do. I don't think staff was necessarily incorrect in what their recommendation was because it's what the comprehensive plan says, but that's our job. And I think Tron did a great job on kind of bringing that point to light, and that's why I'm not going to spend much time on that. I see that the uses that the petitioner is requesting, again, when you couple them against what the agro reserve zone is, I think frankly, I'll just say in most, because I don't know in all, but in most cases is less intensive. And again, partly because of the buffer yard, Jim and Kathy Slinkard own property to the north and to the east. I think that's a part of the plat of Windsor Private. I could be wrong. I don't know if they own that in fee outside the subdivision or if that long narrow area that comes in on the east and the north of this property is part of the plat or not. But that gives some controls with what would happen here. And I'm sure that the homeowners association has some sort of review over that as a part of the plat. I remember staking those roads back in 1989, and it was a great subdivision. Oliver Winery was growing at the time. All the businesses. Sample Road was just a road. Now the I-69 corridors come through, and they've lit it up like a Christmas tree, like nothing else between there and Bloomington. I mean, there's a designation that the comprehensive plan has not taken into consideration with what that interchange is supposed to do and so what it's supposed to look like, in my opinion. The highest and best use. I think the highest and best use is where the county can see in general what the comprehensive plan is telling us to do, and secondly, what the owner can do to maintain the property in a manner that, especially on a corridor like I-69, can keep it in the best condition possible. I pat Jerry on the back for his analysis of the Bell Road Kinzer Pike petition with the ping pong ball analogy. I'll put in the words in his mouth of agro reserve no, agro reserve yes, what's best in this quarter. These are essentially in the same general location. So I just think that was very intuitive, and I didn't think of that, so thanks for bringing that up. So for right now, that's all I've got. I think that the buffer yards are extraordinary. I think we've got a painting that we know what it's going to look like with the added condition that there's nothing outside of the existing buildings, I think is important. So thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Garatas. Mr. Morris?
Yeah, I have several concerns about the proposed PUD. Several of the things on the list, like religious facilities, is top of mind, probably wouldn't have much impact on the neighborhood, so that doesn't concern me too much. But I took a walk through Windsor Private on my lunch break the other day, and it was quiet. I heard, an occasional noise from the highway, maybe a noise from Oliver Winery. It was a very quiet neighborhood. And if I look at some of the proposed uses on this list here, I think that would drastically change the character of that neighborhood. My other concern in the proposed PUD is the operating hours of 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. I think that's difficult to enforce. I think the planning staff doesn't have the resources to go out there every day at 6 o'clock to make sure operations have shut down. And I think that puts the burden of that on the neighbors, which I don't think is good for the neighbors, or the business owner, or the county, either one. So, I think when I look at the use table for Ag-RR, there are quite a few uses that are still permitted. So I don't think by denying this that we're making this property unusable. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Councilor Munson, do you have anything to say?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I will be very brief. I was struck most of all by the table of uses that I thought were incompatible with the adjacent properties. And I think this is something that is going to continue to be an issue until just the right new use for the buildings is identified. And I hope this is the case because we do want the best use possible. I hope the property owner will work with realtors to move this forward, and that we will see this again with an entirely different set of propositions and with support from the neighbors, who I think also would appreciate having a viable, good use next to them rather than a deteriorating commercial buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Munson. Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, I think I would echo a lot of Cheryl's wise words, so I will try not to be repetitive, but I agree that the petitioner should be meeting with the neighbors and talking to them and coming back with a list of potential uses for a rezone. I don't think a PUD is appropriate anyway. It's just another way to rezone and to avoid rezoning something appropriately. So I would recommend that. I think what strikes me, and I don't think it, you know, in one way, I don't think it's fair to create an analogy between every AG-RR petition that's been proposed before us, but I will say that in both cases, for me, it's the neighbors who matter. It's the people who already live there, who've already have an investment, and you know, it might be best and highest use to put a Walmart down the street, but I don't want a Walmart down my street. And it's not zoned commercial for that reason. So, so I think we need to listen to the people who live there and who have invested for their families, for themselves, in residential property based on Worms Way being there. And it would be a good idea to go talk to them and see what can be done, see what uses are viable. And it may be that, you know, and I agree with Mr. Morris that there is, you know, to put some time constraints on it is a difficult thing. You know, it makes sense on one hand, but on the other, who's going to enforce that and how do we enforce that? That's really tricky. So thank you.
Thank you. I just have one or two things to say because you've all been so eloquent and insightful in all of the comments you've made. Number one, I would just like to express my appreciation for the public coming out and for the business owners coming out and the real estate professionals for weighing in on this decision because we've learned a lot tonight. But we also have to consider the, kind of the future of our business economy in and around Bloomington. And I frankly can see a lot of opportunity for an agribusiness to come into that structure and utilize it if it's marketed properly. On the way in here today, I read an article about an investment firm made up of several former athletes at IU who are actually in the business of making business from agribusiness, you know, and so this could be an ideal site that harkens to what it was originally designed for without the pressures on the surrounding neighborhood. And frankly, I see the strongest point having been made by staff that those business overlays have not yet been set because the CDO is still under deliberation. And until that comprehensive development ordinance is passed, which takes a lot of buy-in from the community, we should not be perhaps passing these PUDs that would, as Mr. Morris said, run the risk of, being quite noisome for the neighbors, a transfer storage terminal, metal fabrication and general contractor. If anything, if you look at the zoning map where this current business is, it is right in a residential neighborhood. Oliver Winery is north of that. It's north of that, and so this is a residential neighborhood. And the neighbors continue to come here before us repeatedly to plead with us about keeping their neighborhood, keeping their investment in their property and treasure as it is. So I think that the staff's recommendation to deny this at this point is the strongest recommendation that we've had, because there are a lot of moving parts. We don't know where the business and industrial overlays are going to be. There are a lot of things that we do not yet know. But there have been a lot of pleas tonight to bring this back to yet another hearing. And so I'd like to turn to my colleagues here and see if there's a motion or if, yes, Mr. Enright Randolph?
Not a motion, just, I guess, a request to staff if this does come back. I'd like to get out prior to the vote. And that's just use variances in that area. I guess when we look at a zoning map and it all has the same contiguous zoning, but there are allowed uses, it kind of convolutes, or there's a little ambiguousness to the whole thing. So it'd be nice to kind of see that laid out, because there's places to the north that have used variances. There's places to the south that have used variances. And I think that creates a better understanding of what's going on in that area. Also, I think maybe a snapshot of when Worms Way was built and how many homes were constructed. I did a quick 1998 overlay, and numerous of those homes were not even constructed as Worms Way was already built out. So we hear a lot of impacts, but a lot of people had moved into that area knowing that that operation already existed. And then I think finally, I jotted down my notes. I have an assumption this might move forward to another hearing. So at our administrative meeting, what do plan commissioner members don't want to see there, and what do plan commissioner members do want to see there? I think we need to give some guidance to the petitioner if they are going to meet with the neighbors, and then also what do the neighbors think is okay there as a potential allowable use. I've been working on a comprehensive development ordinance, consolidated development ordinance, and the county development ordinance, basically the CDO. So there's been multiple name iterations of that as well since 2016. So I know that we're moving towards getting a final version. I have all the faith in planning. I'm very optimistic that we're going to get this done, but to have the assumption that this is going to be ready for adoption next year, I think is too much speculation. And if we're able to come to some type of understanding of what best uses allowed on this property, we should move in that direction versus putting them kind of on the back burner of the CDO. Also, one other thing, and sorry, I'm a stickler. When we talk about the planning department going out there and policing these areas, making sure they're in compliance, there is a slew of things out there that the planning department does not have the staff for. So I really feel like those are more overall concerns and not baked into each petition that we see. Because if we started to use that as a consideration, we should pretty much deny most of what we see, because they do not have the capacity to go out there and police all these things. And that's an issue I see and try to deal with on a daily basis. And I mean,
we can make no action and it just moves forward, or if someone wants to try to make a motion.
Does anyone want to make a motion, or if there is no motion, could we at least have agreement that there's no motion? So that we know we send the public home with the correct, information and action, at least on our part, rather. Is there a motion or no motion?
I'm in support with the no motion.
Okay. Everybody else, are you in support of the no motion? Yes, Mr. Caritas.
One of the suggestions that was brought forth, because we are looking at a property that exists and we're looking at neighbors that exist, right? And those are sometimes conflicting, sometimes not. I'm not putting the petitioner on the spot or the petitioner's representative, but is there any interest in the petitioner meeting with the neighbors and seeing if that list can be pared down? I think that just cuts to the chase on whether or not we would proceed this evening with a motion or not.
I will note that part of the PUD requirements is to hold a neighborhood meeting. So that was held with the petitioner's representative.
Okay, and I assumed that, and I thank you for clarifying that. My question is, it was brought up again this evening, so is there any interest to look at that list further? And I'm not putting the petitioner or the neighbors on the spot to get together. It would be a meeting that wouldn't be necessary based on the ordinance. But my feeling is, listen to the Plan Commission members, and I said it after Tron has made his comment about the final hearing, but listening to the Plan Commission members, it sounds like if there's no way that the neighbors and the petitioner's representative are going to be looking at uses that could accommodate one another, then we should just go ahead and proceed with the motion and move on. That's just my personal take on it. I'm open to any discussion.
My meter has expired, so if we're going to have further discussion, I have to excuse myself for a few moments.
I would second Tron's motion to go forward with no motion, so we discuss this again next week.
Is it okay if the petitioner's representative could at least say yes or no if they're
Could you speak into the microphone? I'm sorry.
I think I am, but yeah, I can.
Yeah.
Bernie, sound effects in here are really
I understand.
bad. So if I understand your question, you're asking if this goes to the next meeting, and is petitioner willing to have another neighborhood meeting and further discuss the plan proposals and get more input on proposed uses and whatever?
Yeah, I'm just trying to cut to the chase that if the petitioner's representative and the neighbors aren't necessarily interested in trying to hammer out this list, then I don't know of a reason to continue to another meeting, because that is the issue overall.
Well, not being able to confer with Mr. Heidovitz, I will commit him that petitioner be willing to do it. Whether it be effective or not is a different question,
Okay.
which is really a question that I can't answer, but to make the attempt, certainly.
Yes, sir. Okay, I got you. So Jeff, whatever you've got there with Tron, excuse me, thank you for holding off.
I think we just move to adjournment, or something to that. We don't have to make any motion, it'll just move forward. Is that correct, Jackie?
That's correct. And the
move to
next
reports.
meeting will be on October 26th is the next regular meeting of the Plan Commission.
Okay.
It's moved because of the budget.
Okay, and I just wanted to let the public know that what just happened is there was no motion made tonight. And we will continue this discussion at the October 26th meeting of the Plan Commission. It's an irregular date. We normally have this on is it the second week?
Third Tuesday.
Third Tuesday of the month, but we have a different date because the room is reserved for the budget deliberations. So we will be hearing this again on October 26th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. And that will be the final hearing for the Plan Commission. And just so that you know tonight that there was no vote and no recommendation, and we will continue the deliberation. And if you would kindly, maybe come together with the petitioner or on your own, if you would come up with a list of things that you might like to see there, that would be very helpful. It would be a good step forward, and we would appreciate it. Yes,
Now,
Mr.
If
Garitas.
it's possible that might happen before the next administrative meeting, that might be helpful too, because that would be information that we could have at that meeting as well. Just a suggestion, you guys can do what you want to do.
The October 3rd, the first Tuesday in October It's in the county building, the Showers building on the north end, where some of you have been in the last few weeks. So we have an admin meeting in that room on the first Tuesday of the month.
So there's an administrative meeting on October 3rd. We do not accept public comment
That's
at that meeting. So we're advertising October 26th so that if you'd like to come and speak, it's a public hearing and you're able to do so. But the Plan Commission member, Bernie Garitas, is asking that if you can have a meeting by October 3rd and send those notes to staff, we would be able to bring that up to the Plan Commission for their discussion prior to the October 26th
And
meeting.
maybe give you feedback.
Yes, because it's the budget hearings is
Yeah.
moving the meeting.
And so if I probably would send the recommendations to the staff and then attend the meeting by Zoom, so you don't have to come out until October 26th, but that's me. If I could, I'd attend by Zoom, but we thank you for participating. Thank you. Yes.
Hey, Mr. Carmen, just hang on. We're still live. I'll go ahead and move for adjournment and then say so moved, and then maybe we can turn off the Zoom. Mr. Carmen, I'm sorry. I think we're still active and we're still live. I just don't.
We have to adjourn, just one second. If the meeting is going to be, there was a motion to adjourn. Is that seconded?
Yes.
Is there any objection to adjourning? No? Okay, the meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you.